Young boys play in the small streets of Barbados, dreaming of one day playing Test cricket for the West Indies.
The West Indies is a geographical description of an area, no more. And the only thing they really do as the West Indies is play cricket.
That is more so true of West Indies, I suppose, than anywhere else, especially with the scattered nature of our islands and how we are linked together by water there. What else do we have but cricket that brings us together? We've tried a political federation, it just didn't work. But with cricket, it's stood the test of time and still going.
In the summer of 1960-61, a team from these diverse islands in the Caribbean visited Australia. The type of cricket played that one unforgettable summer would impact on the way Test cricket was played forever. They came as underdogs, but left as the most popular sporting team to ever visit Australia.
This sizzling straight drive takes the score past 100, and even Benno has to applaud the brilliance of Garfield Soper.
The game in Brisbane was labelled the greatest Test match ever played.
And here's the single that wins the match for Australia.
In Adelaide, thousands at the ground and millions of listeners around Australia sat on the edge of their seats as the Test match was fought out to a nail-biting climax.
A no ball, and 20,000 children have rushed onto the Adelaide Oval. And they've all got to get off again.
The final Test in Melbourne attracted a world record crowd, and a perpetual trophy was named in honour of the visiting captain. The West Indian cricketers were accorded the unprecedented honour of a ticker-tape farewell. All this in an era when the White Australia policy was still in existence, and Indigenous Australians were not even recognised as citizens in their own country.
Hey, that's the sort of accolade you give to Prime Ministers, President and film stars, but ordinary West Indian cricketers, you know, playing that wonderful series. It was a marking point for me, certainly.
The arrival of the West Indies team provided the Australian public with their first glimpse of exciting young players, such as Garfield Sobers, who was then the world record holder for the highest score in Test cricket, 365 not out. The dashing Rowan Canhigh, and the giant fast bowler, Wesley Hall.
Coming to Australia, I've read so much about Australia. I think every West Indian would want to go to Australia.
We played very little cricket in the West Indies, and to be selected on a tour of Australia, well, that was the moon as far as I was concerned. I was really delighted.
In the past, inter-island rivalries and insularities had often prevented the West Indies from performing well as a team.
We had to try and prove to Australia and to ourselves and the people in the West Indies that we were going to perform and we were going to give Australia a run for their money.
I think the general mood was that they were very good individually, but didn't look as though they were going to be a particularly good team. And that was because of the results. We knew, the players knew, that they were absolutely devastating. And they had some wonderful players there.
We knew that we were a fairly unique team, but Australia was so strong, and we had never really beaten Australia in a series.
The West Indies had only toured Australia on 2 previous occasions. In 1930-31, the side included the great all-rounder Leary Constantine and the man they called the Black Bradman, George Headley. In 1951-52, the team included 3 star batsmen, Walcott, Weeks and Worrell, the 3 Ws, and the spin twins, Ramadin and Valentine.
We grew up under the impression that, well, the John Goddards and the Ralph Grants and the Jackie Grants and the Arcade Nunes were of, Caucasian, were the leaders.
As part of the island's struggle for self-determination and freedom from colonial rule, C.L.R. James, a writer and political activist from Trinidad, began a campaign to have 36-year-old Frank Worrell appointed as the first black man to captain the West Indies Test team on tour.
The timing was perfect, along with the campaign to get Frank Worrell as captain. And of course he merited on every account, in fact, not just his colour. But that campaign electrified the people of this country and Trinidad and the whole Caribbean. And as a result, therefore, the selectors had nowhere to go except to make him captain, and it was a perfect choice.
When we got Frank Worrell, then we had the first black captain, and that did a lot for the guys that played their hearts out for him.
He was revered by all the players. He was looked upon as the sort of big brother, father figure.
There's a certain respect for seniority, or a certain respect for being an elder. And therefore, if Worrell said to us, jump, we will ask how high. There's no question that he had the complete allegiance and loyalty of every single member of that squad.
The West Indies, as you know, we're players that would come from all different islands and all different ethnic groups and backgrounds. And I think Worrell, he created that type of mood where he was able to get us together as a cohesive force.
He did a good job in that and said that we are West Indians, we're not Trinidadians or Barbadian or Jamaicans or Guyanese. We are all West Indians fighting for the same cause, and we must play as a team.
We must play to win the series, but we must play beyond that to win the respect and the friendship of the Australian people.
We were ambassadors as well. We could not afford to do anything that was stupid. And Frank, being the first coloured man to lead the side, we could not afford to let him down. We could not. Repeat, not.
At the end of the 1950s, Test cricket was in the doldrums. Slow scoring and slow over rates, with England the main culprit, had meant crowds were down and cricket was at a crossroads.
The slowness of the game and the over rate that England bowled in '58 doesn't go all that well with the people to go and watch and pay.
Well, I remember very much the first test in Brisbane, where the Englishmen only made, I think, 109 in a day. Remembering it was only a 5-hour day, but it was one of the worst days of cricket of all time. And a lot of people said that Test cricket was literally going to be dead in Brisbane.
In that match, England batsman Trevor Bailey laboured for 7.5 hours, scoring just 68 runs.
Test cricket was struggling. It was in trouble. We weren't pulling the crowds that perhaps we used to in other times. The cricket was pretty dour.
We had played previously against the MCC. We had 6 days of 5 hours cricket. When you got up on the morning of the 7th day, because you had a day in between for rest, you were wondering, where are you and why are you here? Because surely something is wrong, this thing's going on and it's dragging out. And cricket at that time had really descended into a war of attrition and a tug of war.
It was hoped that with the arrival of the West Indies, whose natural attacking style of play was similar to the Australians, the respective captains, Richie Benaud and Frank Worrell, would provide the lead and play positive cricket.
I went out to meet him and interviewed him for the Sydney Sun, and it was a nice interview, and we just chatted about different things. And at the end of it, I said to him, okay, well, I hope it's a great tour. And he turned to walk towards the plane. No such things as walkways in those days. The plane was just standing there alongside us. And he turned around and came back. And he said, well, we'll have a lot of fun. And that's exactly what we had.
You wouldn't get a nicer guy than Frankie Worrell. He's a real gentleman, and he got on very well with Richie. He got on very well with the rest of the Australian players, and we got on very well with him.
I think that what made it is the relationship between the two teams. I think the two teams played hard on the field, and off the field they both joined and enjoyed themselves, not only at the cricket ground but wherever they met. And there was no animosity at all between the teams. And I think that set the pattern and the tone for a tremendous series.
Before the first day's play, before the test started, there were 5 or 6 Australians and 5 or 6 West Indian players in Gary Sober's room playing Calypso records. And I'd never seen that happen before. And that was the way it got off on that footing, and it was just, we were mates off the field but played very hard on the field.
We didn't have team meetings before 58-9 when I became captain. Might have a few words in the dressing room, I suppose, but no team meetings as such, and I brought that in 58-9. Now, in 1960-61, in December, night before the test match, Bradman asked could he come along. I talked to the team to see if they were happy with that. That gives you an idea of the different things that happened in those days. And he spoke.
And we all listened very carefully to whatever Don Bradman said. For obvious reasons. One, we regarded him as almost as a deity until he was a selector. Yes, he was very good. He implored perhaps. He didn't say you've got to do this. He didn't do that. He just he got the message through that cricket needed a good series, and because we'd had a very bad one with England.
The gist of it was the selectors will be looking in kindly fashion on those who play the game the way it should be played this summer and provide entertainment. And that caught everyone's attention, I can tell you.
It was an exciting time for us because we'd beaten South Africa in South Africa. We'd beaten England back here in Australia in 58-9. We'd been to Pakistan and India. We'd beaten them. And really the only team that we hadn't played against was the West Indies. And if we could beat them with their galaxy of stars, well then obviously we'd have to be the best team in the world.
You've got to bear in mind that the West Indies were very down at that stage. They'd had a pretty ordinary start to the tour. They'd been knocked off in Perth by WA, played a draw in the combined match, I think, got to Adelaide and played a draw, and they beat Victoria, came up and we knocked them off in 3 days in Sydney. And then they played another draw in Queensland, so they weren't chock-block full of confidence.
Frank always tried to drill this into us. He says, look, when the history of this tour is written, you'll find the books will write 90% of it will be on the tests, 10% will be other warm state games and upstate games. So the important thing would be the test matches.
During that 1960-61 tour, we were the underdogs. Everybody thought that the Australians were going to wipe the floor with us. But being the underdogs, we didn't have a lot to lose.
And you find that a lot of teams that visit here get beaten by the States on the way around, and this team was no exception. And when we got to Brisbane, you know, when you play a test match, you can't really take things a bit easy and say, oh, we're going to beat this mob. It's just not on. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there. So we really expected, you know, a fairly tough game, and we certainly got one.
The team captains Richie Benno of Australia and Frank Worrell of the West Indies tossed before the start of the first test match at the Wollongabba ground, Brisbane. And judging by the smile on Frank Worrell's face, he's delighted to win the toss and take first use of the perfect batting pitch.
The slightly unnerving thing for me was that someone in the local press in Queensland had written a story that morning that it looked as though I probably had the wood on sobers. And that was very unnerving, I can tell you.
I remember playing against New South Wales in Sydney. And Richie had got me out twice. And there was a lot of saying that I couldn't pick Richie, couldn't pick his Google. And I remember sitting in the dressing room on a little table they used to have in the players' dressing room outside, sitting there, and it's the first time I ever saw Sir Donald Bradman. He came in, and I was sitting down there, and I must have looked a bit tense and serious, because I remember him coming over to me and saying, put his hand on my head and saying, "Don't you worry, son," he says, "you'll get him the right time."
Play resumes with Benno bowling his first over, and Sobers welcomes him with typical aggression.
Benno was effusive and had a lot of not only ability, but he had a lot of flair as a leg spinner. And Sobers was equally endowed with that type of thing. And therefore it was always a contest on, and Benno met Sobers. It didn't matter who won. The point is that it's the same thing with Shane Warne and Lara. There's always, a statement to be made.
This sizzling straight drive takes the score past the 100, and even Benno has to applaud the brilliance of Garfield Sobers. Here Sobers squashes the theory that West Indians can't play spin bowling.
To a large extent, the Australian myth is more than true, that we are particularly susceptible to good spin, but different strokes for different folks. That does not apply to Gary Sobers.
Sobers passed 50 in 57 minutes, and his innings at this stage included 8 fours. This is a timely return to form after his recent string of failures against New South Wales and Queensland.
He came in when we needed somebody to do something extraordinary. And Gary is one of those men who I think rises to the occasion, even though to that time he's out of form in my view.
It was one of those occasions again where Frank was there, because Frank and I who got together, and he actually played the second fiddle to me at the other end, because I had started to see the ball so well, I started to play shots.
And his influence on the batsman he was batting with at the time, when we had him 3 for 65, guess who was batting with Sabey when Sabey started to go? It was Frank Worrell, who was, still the guardian father, shall we say.
These fellows have no respect for reputations, and Benno has given village green treatment in this over to Sobers.
Sobers is in great form. 9 hours at first slip there, and occasionally he'd be trying to square cuts or hit shots off the back foot. Richie's toppy, which is a great delivery, he used to slide on very quick. And I was absolutely terrified if he got a nick that I was going to get cut in half. But he never did, he just kept smashing. It was probably the best innings I've ever seen play.
Even though he was in the other side and I was having my hands warmed in the covers by trying to stop a few of those cover drives, it's always a pleasure to watch a guy that's that good. He probably had reflexes like Bradman, I think. He picked up the line quickly and he picked up the length quickly.
Sobers 100, a century which was rated by ABC commentator Johnny Moyes as one of the best he has seen in 50 years of cricket. Flying the bowler now to feel the might of this 24-year-old batsman who has just scored his 10th 100 in Test cricket.
I can remember one ball I bowled to Gary. He was in full cry, and you're trying to change up on him a bit, and I decided to change up on him and bowl a little bit wider. But he's creamed it, and I've got one bloke in the covers called Colin McDonald. Colin hasn't even got down to it. It's hit him.
I put my hand down, it missed my hand, it hit me on the wrist, just above the hand. And that didn't stop it, it bounced off my wrist and then went flying up over my head.
Ricocheted, hit the boundary, and was back in by his foot before he turned around.
And that was probably the only shot where he hadn't bisected the field. I think that's the greatest thing was his placement that day, in that while his timing and everything was beautiful, it was his placement.
He scored 132 in even time, out of form. Think what would happen if he had been in form, you see.
Sobers spoons up an easy catch off a full toss from Mecca, and he's out for 132. This great innings lasted only 3 hours, and it included 21 fours.
I had a stroke of good luck. He only made 132, but he made a great number of them off me.
And I remember after that innings, which Sir Donald said then was one of the best innings ever seen in Australia. And he met me as I was coming off. And he said to me, oh, it's a good thing you couldn't pick Richie.
With Frank Worrell providing the backbone of the innings, the West Indies set the series alight, scoring at a run a minute, something that particularly delighted the Don.
Sir Donald Bradman, I think, was the chairman of the selection committee at the time, and he used to come and sit with the players.
And he was absolutely delighted at the end of the first day in Brisbane that the West Indies had scored over 300 runs. And he just kept saying 300 in a day. I don't believe this. 300 in a day.
He sat with you and he analysed the game and he made his predictions.
And then he turned to Wes Hall and he said to Wes, well, Wes, how many are you going to get? And Wes had sheepishly turned to Sir Don and said, well, I think I'll make about 10 or 12, you know. And Sir Don exploded. He said, imagine that. You go and bowl your heart out day after day, and when you go to bat, you only want to make 10 or 12. You must be mad. And I think this seed was sown.
And the big Saturday crowd revels in the display by the giant West Indian Wesley Hall. The big fellow doesn't have any claim to know the finer points of batsmanship, but his technique, whether it's polished or not, is paying dividends. Wesley Hall amuses and delights the crowd with his immaculate defensive movement. Davidson has another crack at Wesley Hall. The young giant cracks back and charges down the pitch. A collision. Down he goes and up to complete 2 runs with the whole ground in a state of pandemonium.
He's wonderful to listen to, Wes, when he gets his eyes gleaming and starts telling you a story. And he was always a great character on the field as well. Never a dull moment when Wes was batting or bowling or fielding. He was just that sort of player.
Time to attack, and Alexander goes for a big hit. Alexander has been batting a long time for his 30-odd runs, but he realises that the end is not far away.
Jerry, you know, apart from being, you know, a great keeper, he had that ability to, you know, he could take after the spinners, so he wasn't afraid to play a lofted drive. And the most influential player, I think, in the whole series for West Indies was Jerry Alexander, because Jerry scored, you know, an enormous number of runs in that series. I don't think he failed. He was getting 60s and 70s and every time he went out to bat, and it was a real thorn in our side.
It was particularly enthusiastic to get up in the morning and said, roll on 10 o'clock, we want to go out there. And this was a remarkable feeling on a cricket field, when I'm telling you we had been through this war of attrition in previous test series.
Now Hall has the strike, and the crowd settles down for some legalised assault and battery as Ian Meckiff moves in to bowl. Another 4 to Hall. 17 runs off the over. A high pitch of excitement as Hall needs 1 more for his 50. Wesley Hall, 50 runs in 65 minutes, and they're loving every minute.
After enthralling the crowd with his cavalier batting, Wes Hall turned his attention to hurling his thunderbolts at the Australian batsman.
A full toss right at McDonald's head. A fiery opening by the giant bowler. This is real test match heat, with Hall bowling at express speed from the start. The ball is coming to McDonald at 90 miles an hour, but the plucky Victorian opens the Australian scoring with 2 runs through the packed leg side field.
I expected to be able to handle it, but I think Wes Hall raised his sights 1 run. It was a test match, and I think he was even then faster than I expected.
A really vicious ball. Straight at the batsman, and McDonald collapses in pain. McDonald was struck just under the heart by a ball which reared up from a little short of a length. McDonald, a tough fellow, is soon ready to face Hall again.
I knew I could handle it from a fear point of view, but I didn't expect to have to take so many on the body.
McDonald has taken all that Hall has to offer, never once flinching from the job at hand. It must be a frightening experience facing this giant bowler, but McDonald is as tough and courageous as they come. This is a graphic close-up as McDonald is struck again. McDonald has taken the worst pounding of his career, and his courage has won him the admiration and respect of every person at the ground. It's significant, too, that every West Indian player, including those from the outfield, have come to offer sympathy.
It's the ball itself is sewn together with string, which makes up the seam. And that seam is quite prominent, and the individual bits of string were clearly implanted in my body. You can see the marks. They were blue and red, and the in-between bits were white, or a yellowy white. It was quite clear.
Then Sobers strikes a great blow for the West Indies. McDonald plays an uppish leg glance, and Hunt takes a brilliant catch at leg slip. MacDonald is out. Court Hunt bowled Sobers for 57, an innings which was rated by experts as one of the most courageous in modern cricket.
The stage was now set for Australia's brightest new batting star, Norman O'Neill.
When we got to Australia, we heard about the successor to Bradman, this Norman O'Neill, and I remember somebody took us over to the club. I don't know if it's Manly or one of these clubs he used to play for in Sydney, one Saturday afternoon. The tour don't start, just to show us this guy bat. He made 100 that day too. I said, oh my God, this guy hit the ball hard, you know what I mean? So we have something to reckon with, you know.
I suppose, you know, when you're as good as Normie was, somebody's got to plant that tag on you, and unfortunately he got it.
It is very hard to be compared to Sir Donald Bradman. And therein lies the story. I mean, you know, if anybody called you a new Bradman, they're nearly putting a curse on you, it seems to me, because it's so much to live up to.
Ball works up to top speed, and the success of the Australians rests on the shoulders of O'Neill. A terrible blow, and O'Neill collapses on the pitch in agony.
He batted very badly to start with, from memory. He was playing and missing and doing all sorts of terrible things, but it developed into a very great innings and a memorable innings.
If you can get him through the first 30, there was nothing Normie couldn't do.
If I had 1 hour left in my life to watch a person that I admired the most and enjoyed the most with batting, it'd be Norman O'Neill. I just loved watching him bat. I thought he was technically brilliant, he was very correct. His footwork was just fantastic. He's the only player I think I've ever seen who could consistently hit a man to Wes Hall's pace, straight back, past the bowler, off the back foot with a straight bat. That's a sign of a near genius.
Valentine bowls, and O'Neill, with a straight drive, brings up his first century in a test match in Australia.
This particular innings in Brisbane was absolutely brilliant. I would deem that as Normie's best innings he's played in his life.
O'Neill attempts a lofted drive, the ball soars high in the air, and Valentine, waiting at mid-off, takes the catch. And his total of 181 was his best in a test match. His innings, which lasted 400 minutes, included 22 fours.
Australia led by 52 runs on the first innings.
A fast-swinging Yorker, and Sobers is clean bowled.
Following on from his 5 wickets in the first innings, the spearhead of the Australian attack, Alan Davidson, took 6 wickets in the West Indies' second innings to put Australia in a winning position.
Paul, clean bowled, and the West Indians are all out for 284. They have a lead of 232 runs, and Australia has just over 300 minutes batting time left to score the run.
I thought we could get these, even though the ball was turning a bit. It didn't have a great deal in it for the pace bowlers, but it was a pretty good track. And the thing we wanted was a decent start, which we didn't get. Then we wanted a bit in the middle, which we didn't get.
Neil Harvey snicks and Sobers takes a brilliant catch. Sobers dislocated his finger taking the ball, and Alexander, a veterinary surgeon by profession, applies first aid.
And Wes Hall was bowling at 155 miles an hour, or seemed to be, and he had us really on the ropes.
Australia had slumped to 5 for 57. Alan Davidson again found himself out in the middle.
I think I bowled 35 or something in the first dig and about 27 in the second. I've got 40 odd with the bat, and you know, to me I'd been on the field basically the whole of 5 days, and I thought, what the hell's going on here? Like I shouldn't be out here. The only thing that satisfied me actually when I walked out in the middle was the fact that there was old Slasher, and old Slash was chewing on the cud, and as he usually did, he was a really laconic sort of fella, a very dry character, and he says, it's not going to be easy. And I nearly broke up with that because despite the seriousness of the position, it was just one of those things that, and of course then he said, I'm not playing Ramlin too well. He said, find it hard to pick him.
Mackay beaten is clean bowled, and Australia, with 6 wickets down, is still 141 runs behind. Mackay scored 28 runs, and Australia has 92 on the board.
As he walked past, said, sorry, and that was about the end of the conversation.
But we got to 6 for 92, chasing 232, and we were gone, absolutely gone to goings. There's no way in the world we're going to get out of this.
Frank Worrell seemed to have been keeping a particular eye on me and kept me pretty close to him. So there was always a conversation going between the two of us. And I recall quite vividly that when Australia had lost about 6 wickets, I said to him, "We got them." And he said, "Oh no, not yet."
Richie Benaud survived an appeal for foot behind of Ramadan's first ball. The Australians have reached the end of their batting lineup, and the result of the match hinges on the performance of the 2 players at the wickets.
And at tea time, we were in such trouble that I was sitting there with Davo, and we were talking about quick singles after the break, and we'd see if we could put pressure on them. And the Don came down, and as he always did, came down and had a cup of tea, and he said, "Well, what's it going to be?" And I said to him, "Well, we're going for a win." But he just said, "I'm very pleased to hear it."
And as we walked out through the gate, he said, "Well, come on, let's see if we can do it."
Australia had to score a run a minute in the final session to win the match, a seemingly impossible task.
Davidson and Benaud rise to the occasion, and this is the start of a great partnership.
We would never underestimate Richie and Devo. And even at that stage, even though we thought we had a chance, we could never be overconfident that we would have won that game. They were such fantastic players. We knew they were capable of winning it for Australia.
Davidson and Benaud put on a century partnership, and the game is building up to a dramatic climax.
That would go down as probably one of the best partnerships that's ever been in Test cricket. On the 5th day wicket, which is not easy at the best of times.
As Hall bowls with the new ball at 20 minutes to 6. Davidson with an off drive, and Australia wants 23 runs to win.
Having Davo there was something of a comfort because we'd had all those partnerships in South Africa only a few months before. So I was confident that at least we'd give a decent account of ourselves, and that was one of the reasons for going for it.
A whole bumper, a vigorous hook shot, an obvious 4, 18 runs required.
We went for stupid singles, we did all sorts of things, but we got in a position to make it a great game.
17 runs to win. It's a real grandstand finish, and Richie Benaud is getting anxious with 15 minutes left. It's going to be a photo finish result with the whole crowd in a state of feverish excitement.
Frank Worrell's task was to keep us calm. He said, "Keep calm, gentlemen, it's not over yet."
Part of our problem was that we developed a great nervous and anxiety and emotional situation at West Indians, especially when things got tight. And he had a remarkable sedatory sort of influence on the boys.
Yes, 10 to make and the match to win. A breathless hush as they bowl, a tremendous cheer as they score. 9 runs to get, 10 minutes to go.
Davidson and Benaud continued to bat, and they got to the stage where I said, "Well, we've lost. Skipper, are we gone now?" He said, "Oh no, not yet."
Richie Benaud playing a great captain's hand in this, the greatest Test match finish in the long history of the game.
I put the whole thing back to Richie, where he took it up to the West Indians. They played it as the one-day game is played today, he and Alan Davidson. 2 great all-rounders, both of them could bat extremely well, and they just took it up.
A push to leg, a suicidal run. They scamper home, 8 to win.
They were taking these cheeky little singles. It's the sort of thing that you just didn't do in cricket in those days. And I remember Wally Grout, who was the next man in, and Wally, I reckon, went through a packet of cigarettes. He was a complete nervous wreck. His hair, rubbing his hand through his hair.
And I said to Richie, I said, "Look, we're home, mate." I said, no stupid singles from now on, we don't have to do anything silly.
And then we knew that Frank had to keep Wes for a big effort at the last, providing I didn't do something stupid like run Davo out, which I did.
Sobers the bowler. Benaud plays the ball to mid-wicket. They start down the pitch, and Davidson is run out by a magnificent return from Solomon. Davidson run out for 80. What a grand cricketer he is. 40-odd runs in the first innings and 11 wickets in the match.
When you think that the captain, with victory in sight, has run out the guy who is just about to win the game, that was particularly stupid.
To be quite honest, I was dirty.
And he did give a quick head turn, but I was turning the other way. It was far too short a single. I knew as we were crossing that it was going to be in trouble.
Yeah, they were playing where Davidson Benno played well, and we didn't expect to come back in the game. But I was lucky to get Davidson run out.
We knew from the very beginning, in Shell Shield matches and club matches, wherever Joe played, we knew he had an accurate throw.
The boys from the country always pitch marbles and tried to steal mangoes, hitting them down. And we can say we used to have a good aim.
But he had been practicing all along for many years to be accurate in throwing, and that's why he was able to do it. It didn't happen by accident. It was planned part of his training and preparation for Test cricket.
7 runs to outright victory with Sobers bowling to Grouse. Just 6 more runs. The last ball of Sobers over, and Benno trying to keep the strike with only 5 minutes left for play.
And what was going on in the dressing room was Slashy Mackay was superstitious, and we had to be in our seats by the time the first ball was bowled on every over, and we had to be there for the over. And if we had to go to the toilet, we had to do it between overs. And Slasher was very adamant about that, and he said that made a big difference if we all sat down and we didn't move.
We didn't panic until the last over, and then we did panic.
Now comes the amazing finish to the Test match with Wesley Hall bowling the first ball of the last over.
The first ball hit Wally Grout in the groin, and Benno called. He wanted to finish it, you know. He was batting well. It was the last over, and he called Grout. Grout wasn't too keen, and I don't think anybody would if you get a ball traveling at 90 miles an hour full in the groin, and he just hobbled through.
When Wally got out there, I was saying to him, well, it's just a question of keeping our heads.
I think my captain, Sir Frank Ward, he sensed Benno's anxiety or his eagerness to get on with it. And he said to me, Winfield, don't you bowl a bouncer? And I said, okay, sir, I wouldn't bowl a bouncer. But in those days, my bowling a bouncer was conditioned not by whether the captain told me to bowl one or not. It was conditioned by how I felt in my run-up. If I felt good, well, that is what you'll get, you know.
Moves in, bowls to Benno. Benno tries to hook him, and is out! Got the edge and is put behind by Alexander. Gracious mate. 8 wickets for 228. Well, what a Test match.
I turned around, I said, Skipper, we've got him. A stony stare. I tell you, I nearly collapsed. I couldn't believe it. He said, what did I tell you? I said, I don't know, you'll have to tell me again. He said, I said not to bowl a bouncer. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry about that. He said, do you realize what would have happened if that had taken the top edge? And he said, do you know what the score is? I said, we need 4 to win. He says, exactly. You know?
I mean, Wesley Hall was a great fast bowler. I think we all forget that he was on his own. I mean, the West Indies as they are today, and they have been, for the last 15 or 20 years, they've had 3 or 4 of them that have all been great. Wesley did it all on his own back. He'd bowled 20-odd overs, and they were 8 ball overs, remember, they weren't 6 balls. He was still going just as strong in that last over in the Queensland heat. He was a terrifying sight, I can promise you. If you were standing down the end and, you know, he had a run-up of about 30 metres, and he really did run in very, very hard, and he was a superb athlete. So, I mean, when you're batting at number 10 against a bloke like Wesley Hall, it's not really pretty.
I remember the dressing rooms were fairly close to each other, so the players would be sitting down almost adjacent to each other, and to look at the faces of those who had to go in. Lizzie Clyde, he was pale, pale, pale.
I thought, I'm in this now, and the over before, I thought, gee, I won't have to bat, this is great. But when Ian went in, and that's when I padded up, and I thought, you know, I hope they can get through without me going in.
Hall now to make it. Moves in on his leg stump. Tries to sweep it, and here's a stolen single, and he might be run out and hold it.
Wes could have taken off and just taken the bars off.
I attempted to throw the wicket down from about 2 yards and miss by a mile.
You know, Wes picked this ball up and he's supposed to just throw it to Frank Worrell to get the run out and thing, and he threw it as hard as he bowled it. And it flew past the stumps and I backed it up.
That is a good thing that Valentine was there to back it up. Otherwise, before what throws, and we would have lost.
I couldn't afford to misfield because the captain had us on our toes. Everybody up, keep on saying, come on, just take it easy, we can do it. That kind of stuff.
The calmest man in the whole field was Frank Worrell. The rest of us had to fight hard to keep calm because we were very excitable as a people.
There was barracking going on from the dressing room. Yes, no, we were doing all the calling for the batsmen. And it just built up to this brilliant crescendo.
Crowd skies him. 3 of them, 4 of them getting under it. Can High gets it and it's not! 4 of them converged on the ball.
Well, there was no doubt when Grout skied that ball whose catch it was. I was under it, waiting for it, and then from nowhere there was a black arm over my face.
In my mind's eye, I can tell you, I saw that my excuse is that no fielder attempted to move.
Any one of 4 of us to take the catch. Is Alexander keeping wickets? Can I backward square? I at mid-wicket. Even Frank Worrell at mid-on could have taken the catch.
Rohan at the time said words to him which could not have been mentioned then or printed, and still could not be mentioned in these days. But it wasn't very complimented to his mother or father.
But Frank Worrell kept us calm. He said, never mind that, we can still do it. And that, I think, saved the situation.
Not only that, the scoreboard wasn't working. They'd mucked I shouldn't say it could only happen in Queensland, but it did. The scoreboard operators, I'm sure, didn't know what the score was, and they'd stopped operating it.
At that stage, I knew Australia needed 3 runs off 3 balls. And therefore I sensed that Metcalfe is bound to have a go at West Hall. And at that pace, 90 miles an hour with the second new ball, is bound to fly. So I quietly dropped back. What you should never do on a cricket field, never move before a captain moves you. I quietly slipped back a little further back.
Goes to Metcalfe. Metcalfe pulls him high into the outfield. 4 runs. No, it won't get to the fence. They're going for the 3 though. Grout slides his bat behind the line. He's flying fast and he's out.
It would have gone for 4 if the groundsman had cut the outfield in the morning. When I got down there and saw all the clover there, as you know, it grows as you look at it in Brisbane, I said to him, what's happened? You haven't cut the outfield. Oh, got a bit caught up, mate, he said. Ran out of time.
I knew my one chance of getting him out on the 3rd round was to throw to Alexander with keeper, not to the bowler. That's a possible miss. I was conscious that he was running 1, running 2, and he was turning for the 3rd. And I knew he only had 32 yards, I had 90. And therefore, I could only beat him by the quickest, fastest, lowest throw I had ever thrown.
Conrad chased it, and when he picked it up and looked up and turned, the sun must have been directly in his eyes for a fraction of a second. And it was certainly in Jerry Alexander's eyes over there and standing by the stumps.
I realized that I could beat him with a throw if I threw quick enough. I had to throw 4 times as quick as he had to run, you see, in order to get there.
It wasn't quite as easy as it looked. And in truth and in fact, I had to actually move to my right in front of the stumps, which actually, if I had waited behind the stumps if it had come in, I don't think we would have got the run out.
And so when I got to the ball, just before it got to the boundary, I turned and baseball style, I threw the ball to bounce, first bounce on the square, which is going to give electric pace to Alexander.
I remember thinking, no, don't drop the ball. And for God's sake, where the hell is the wicket? I had going on the right and figured. It looked as though it all worked out that, well, there was no trouble because the wickets were there. But I remember feeling afterwards, thank God for that, because I was quite agitated that in keeping my eye on the ball, holding it and then swiveling to reach back to the stumps, I hadn't missed the stumps.
And the throw came in, if it had been half a yard further out, then the batsman would have made it. It was a magnificent throw.
The crucial point where I'm concerned, and that one, is the throw from Conrad Hunt to run out Wally Grout. If not, Australia would have won that match.
Now, the ball only stopped 9 inches short of the boundary. And I maintain that if the groundsman had to cut the grass before play started, that ball would have rolled into the fence and we'd have won the game by 1 run.
Well, I had trouble finding my batting gloves, I know that. You know, they were somewhere and I finally found them and out I went. And then I walked past Frank Waller and Frank said, "Oh, Lindsay, you look a little pale," and I couldn't disagree with that. I suppose I did.
Really, all I said to Lindsay, if you hit it, we run.
I was running for a win and he was running for a tie.
We all knew that this is the last run and we got to be moved in and try to stop it.
As a wicket-keeper, I was telling myself, as Frank had said, be cool. Now, for God's sake, stay down, because I was worried, my God, suppose he does get an edge. I've got to take it. This is it.
I was standing at leg slip and I remember saying to myself, for God's sake, don't let this ball come down here to me, because I really would like to make the mistake.
The last over that bowled was so tense that if you weren't strong inside, I don't think you'd have survived.
One of the things about captaincy, I think, is you always need to exude the feeling to your players that there's something just around the corner that you're about to pull out of the hat. That may not be so.
All this time, Worrell was saying to me, well, Winfield, I have something to tell you. And then when I got there, he said, well, I don't have anything to tell you, but the batsman doesn't know that I don't have anything to tell you.
If I move that man at square leg 2 yards to his right and then move him back 2 to his left, the batsman still would not notice what have happened.
He says, one thing I have to tell you. The scores are even right now. You have this ball and another ball to bowl. Please remember, do not bowl a no ball, because if you do, you will never be able to land in Barbados again.
Or the West Indies, with all of those millions of people in the West Indies.
I had the feeling that he went back so far he pushed off the fence, but I don't think he quite did that. But I thought to myself while he's running in, gee, it's taking some time. I wish you'd hurry up and get here, because I'm pretty nervous and I want it over and done with.
I planted my foot a good 18 inches, I reckon, behind the crease.
So far behind the popping crease, that if there was a malignant Australian umpire, he couldn't even call him no ball.
Ball will bowl decline. And here's the single that wins the match for Australia. He's out! He's ready! Right there! He comes to down! Well, no, it's a tie.
And I suppose that I got a bit of a shock when he hit it, so I hesitated. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Then I got run out, and I got run out pretty easily.
The ball was coming to me. I know it was the last run for the Australian to win, and I collected with both hands and not one hand, and I threw the wicket. It went straight in the stump.
Did you feel like the boy with a mango again?
It's a good thing I've had the practice.
It's tremendous under that pressure to stay at square leg and to see one stump and to hit it under all that tense situation.
I knew we needed 1 run to win, and when you go for a quick single like we tried to get, and some guy throws the stumps down from side on with only 1 stump to aim at, that's a rare occurrence. I suppose we can all accept that once, but as we know, it happened twice.
And pandemonium broke out. It was a wild scene. Everybody was excited, except Worrell. He was there as passive as ever, and his knees buckled. I believe it was all that energy in marshalling his forces, and he realized he had not lost the game, and he just sunk, not to the ground, but his knees did buckle as if he had received a right hook from Tyson.
I tell you what, I didn't know if it was a tie, if we had won, if Australia had won, if the West Indies had won, or if we had lost. I didn't know.
And I thought at that time we had won.
When the game concluded, I said, oh, we lost by a run.
We were not sure. We thought we'd won, if anything, because certainly it wasn't a draw.
The only conclusion I came to was we weren't beaten.
I remember Mekif saying, fancy losing like that. He thought he'd lost because 10 men were out.
We had a figure I had a figure in my mind of 233 to win. And from that point, we hadn't made 233, and I just thought, well, that's the end of it.
We remember running off the field and querying what really has happened. We haven't won, but we haven't lost. That's it. The two things flashed. But there was no such thing as a tie.
Who won, who lost, because it never happened before. And I remember Rohan walking around saying, oh, we've won, we've won. And somebody said, no, the Aussies, we've won, we've won. And then somebody came up with the bright idea, well, let both teams have one. It got to be a tie.
I thought a tie, that's great. That'll do.
It was not in our cricketing upbringing to have a tie. I've known about winning, to draw or to lose, but certainly not to tie.
I mean, we knew in the dressing room what it was. No one was in the slightest doubt in our side.
And it took Richie quite a while to calm me down in the dressing room.
It wasn't until I got to the dressing rooms afterwards, I still had my pads on, and I grabbed a drink, and Colin McDonald said, what are you looking so unhappy for? And I said, we've been beaten. And he said, no, it's a tie.
You know, incredible game, but I maintain it was a groundsman's fault.
Frank came in and just slumped in the seat. And he sat there and said absolutely nothing for a while.
And he was absolutely knackered. No question about that. So was I, but for a different reason, that we'd not won a cricket match that we should have won.
It hadn't struck me that this is a tie. And then I suppose it was then the Don came in, and I've never seen a bloke with a bigger smile on his face than the Don.
He was one of the happiest men I've ever seen. And he said, this is absolutely marvellous.
I remember betting £0.50 with Sir Donald on the result of the tied test. And afterwards I said, well, you see, Sir Donald, you didn't win that time. He said, yeah, but I was only wrong by 1 run. You know, you could never get the last word with him. So.
Well, I said to the Don at the end, that's ridiculous, 3 run-outs in that short space of time. And we had it there for the taking. And he said, don't worry about it. He said, you'll find that that is the greatest thing that's ever happened to the game of cricket. I said, well, it's not at the moment.
But in this case, when you've got a tied test match and both teams can celebrate together, I've never seen a celebration like it since, before, or will ever do again, I wouldn't think.
The fact the tie was played in Brisbane, where basically you share the same viewing areas. Your dressing room has a common wall, so it's not very hard to start to talk to the opposition.
We had these tables set up, and you had a West Indian and Australian, all the way around, and they were all mixed up in together. The champagne came out and everything at the end of the tied test. And that to me was the culmination of it all, because that was when everybody had been through something massive, something that was, well, unique. It was the first tie in test history. And here it was everybody sort of laughing and joking and telling stories.
The champagne was flowing. I certainly enjoyed that evening.
I can promise you we did celebrate. It was a very heavy celebration.
I don't think we left the ground until about 10 o'clock that evening.
With the Australians and the West Indian, both together, having drinks and singing, and you know, it was a marvellous experience.
The teams were there drinking a few beers and things like that, and talking and not particularly caring who had won. I think that day cricket won.
I was glad to be involved in such a match, you know, because it creates history. And I think it will be there forever.
Now we knew that we could compete successfully with Australia, who were then world champions. We were the underdogs. We knew from that moment onwards, it's only a matter who played best on the day. And therefore, our confidence in ourselves and our abilities was released.
He's in, bowls to Benno. Benno tries to hook him, and he's out! Got the edge, and he's caught behind by Alexander. 8 wickets for 228. Well, what a test match. Ball now to Mickey. Moves in on his leg stump. Tries to sweep it, and here's a stolen signal. He might be run out and hauled it. 8 for 229.